I'm Gavin Clark with the National Museum of Computing and Reading Museum, and we're interviewing former employees and customers of Digital Equipment Corporation as part of the 60th anniversary of DEC opening its first offices in the UK. It's January the 9th, 2024, and we are at TNMOC at Bletchley Park. I'm here today talking to Gerald Marsh. Gerald, please, let's start with the basics. Tell us your full name, your place and your year of birth.
It's Gerald Marsh, and I was born in 1957 in a small village called Abercwmboi, which is in the Aberdare mining valley, part of the mining valleys with which most people are familiar these days. And as regards technology, it was a different world. Even when I went to grammar school, there were no computers in school then. I was not brilliant at school. In fact, I didn't like it at all. And I was never very academic. Unlike some of my mates who weren't academic, I wasn't that much good with woodwork or metalwork either. So I was always a little bit in the middle there.
What was your parental background? What did your parents do?
My mother was a factory worker and my father was a miner, which is pretty typical of somebody of my age in the valleys. Like about 80% of them, you know, and most of us never saw a university. No way. So I messed up my A-levels. I got a few O-levels, and at that time they were looking for people with O-levels to be mine managers, mine supervisors, and I promised my father I wouldn't go down a pit. And I think I know this is a bit of an aside, he emphasised how not to go down the pit, because when my brother and I were very young, he put us in what's called the cage, in the deep Dyffryn colliery, and down we went with him. And I can still remember it to this day, and that was probably 60 years ago, and I can still remember how extraordinarily horrific it was. It's not like you see in the films. It is it's dark and a very long trip. He just took us out the cage, put us back in and sent us back up to the surface. I've never been so pleased to see sunlight in my life. So that sort of put me off that as a career.
So you didn't enjoy school though, and
No.
You didn't do so well at ORA levels. What subjects did you enjoy and what didn't you do so well at?
Well, I did actually enjoy science, but I don't know. You wouldn't like to complain about the style of teaching. You know, it's vastly different these days. But it was just reading stuff out of a book, and I've always suspected myself to be somewhat neurodiverse, and I just couldn't handle that at all. And I just found it extraordinarily boring, which is a shame looking back on it, you know. But, I ended up accidentally being a student radiographer for a few years.
How did you fall into that?
Well, I didn't tell my mother I was going for the interview, and it was across the valley. I had a motorbike at the time to travel back and forth, and it was in Merthyr General Hospital, and the interview went something like, how many O-levels you got? 5 GCSEs these days, yeah. And what are they? So I told him. He said, have a quick look around. What do you think? I said, oh, I like this machinery. I said, I like this kit. He said, oh, we'd like to take you on. Would you like to start as a student radiographer in you'd have to move into East Glamorgan Hospital's nurses' home next Monday. This was a Thursday. So off I went. My stepfather dropped me off there, and I spent 3.5 years of it. Messed one of my final exams up 3 times. I would not have worked for the health service then, only because I thought that the people doing the actual work were not well rewarded and were told what to do by people that shouldn't have been, in my own personal opinion, yeah. So as it happened, when I was thinking what to do with myself next, still living in the nurse's home, one of the apprentice electricians there, he said there's aptitude tests happening in the Angel Hotel in Cardiff, and he said, do you want to go down there? I said, yeah, go on then, there's something to do. And we may have a beer or two afterwards, you know. So we both went down there. It was quite intensive aptitude tests. I didn't know what it was about. It was run by the Control Data Institute, by the way. And I passed them with flying colours, and he didn't. And then I had to have attend 2 interviews, and I ended up on a TOPS course. I don't know what it stands for now, to be honest. It was a government-sponsored thing, a government initiative, which, unlike many of them, actually worked. And I got a lot to be grateful for that. So off I went to the Control Data Institute in Bristol. Very intensive course.
In what? What did you do?
In computing. Computer operating, actually. It covered IBM and ICL mainframes and the absolute fundamentals of computing. All the ones and noughts. I reckon I passed A-level computing on what I learned from that TOPS course without too much hassle. So that put me on that career. It was all right. It's not like as one would see these days, but it was it's worked for me. There was self-motivation there as well, including what I told my old man, and I certainly didn't want to go down a pit.
So do you know what you were getting into? You did the aptitude test. Did you know computing was involved in some way at this point?
I didn't know much about it whatsoever. Let me think now. So that would have been about 1978, 79. I don't think even the BBC Micro was around then. So, you know, that was early days. I mean, of course, the big companies had mainframes then. Mm-hmm. But personal computing was in its infancy.
So what was when did you get your first job in what might call computing technology?
Yeah, I went straight from that, straight into Franti Computer Systems in Cwmbran. And in the meantime, I've come across many people that started it. It was a brilliant place for training, absolutely brilliant. Lovely people there. Some of the very experienced software engineer contractors took me under their wing. Thought, what is it about this values boy? We'll see if we can teach him something. And I was like a sponge for that information then.
What were you learning?
Programming, mainly, and how the real fundamentals. These are military systems, and the way they worked, especially as a computer operator, you had to have hands-on with machine code. You know, it's not like Microsoft Word type stuff. You had to know your stuff, including instruction formats and all that. By the way, when I went for a subsequent interview in Barclays as a contractor, the team leader there, when he saw my CV, he asked me what the instruction format was of a Ferranti FM 1600E computer. And I told him, because he used to work them in the Navy. Because as I said, they were military systems. And it put me in good stead, I think. It really did. I was lucky I had some very good management with some faith in me.
So at what point, therefore, do you start experiencing your first DEC systems? When do they start coming into your world?
Well, I must have only been in Ferranti about a year. And these things were like, they were military systems. They were very tough. You know, they were designed to be like blown up, basically. They weren't the most friendliest of operating systems. They were good at what they did. Like, they would take readings from radar systems and target guns, missiles, that type of stuff. Yeah? Not very adapted to humans very much. And when they first brought in the VAX, I think it was a 780 or a 782, and me and a few other operators, well, we were blown away by it as to like what its capabilities were. The command language, I can remember that feeling now. The command language compared to the commands that we were used to, I thought they're English-like, and it's just helpful. You type in help and useful information comes back to you, you know. And another thing, it used monitors. It didn't use teletypes, because these old military systems, they use teletypes with little punch card readers on the side and the like, you know.
So a teletype is what? It's like a card, a tape system you have to feed in?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like it's a keyboard, but with like a typewriter, and much chunkier. And likewise, you get things back. It hasn't got a screen on it. It would type it out. And as I said, you could put normal paper tape. I think it's probably 8-channel. Or mylar tape, which is the tougher stuff meant for system programs. You could read that into them as well.
So you're using systems that have got like a user interface and a keyboard.
Yeah, yeah.
And what's the computing power like? What kind of results are you getting?
Well, the 780, for one thing, I don't know what your experiences are of compilers and assemblers and that, right? But some of these compilers were tape-based. So if one of the programmers wanted to compile a program, he'd have to run it using a tape-based compiler over a few passes. That could take some hours for one program. Whereas on the VAC system, with that operating system, the compiler was on disk. And so it was nigh on instantaneous. And it had a decent debugger. Even in those days, it had a decent debugger. So as regards the programming development environment, it was a completely different league. Absolutely brilliant.
So you're still a relatively young programmer, I think, at this point, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I was a computer operator. I did do quite a bit of programming. Not because I'm particularly clever at it, but because I was a very lazy computer operator. And I didn't want to do many of the things I knew a computer could do better than me. So therefore, I would, in my own time, by the way, after shift work, I'd stay there and teach myself a bit more and do utility programs to make life a little bit easier. On the paper tape, I don't know if I told you, but I put together a program whereby if you typed in the characters, it would do the characters on the paper tape. So you could do like a happy birthday streamer with the words HAPPY punched into the tape, you know what I mean? Well, of course, the operators loved that, but it got a little bit too popular and some of the management had a word.
Tell us about you also said that it was the first tree multi-processing system as well, the VAC system you're using. What does that mean?
Well, the old Ferranti ones, there was only one person could do the programming on them at the time. They were both, the VACs were both multi-processor and multi-programming.
What does that mean to people?
Well, it means that more than one person can use it. And in the case of the VAC 782, it had more than one processor in it. So it could actually do two things at the same time. And of course, with the Intel kit these days, you get 12 cores, 16 cores. Everybody's used to it. But in those days, that was quite mind-blowing for me.
What could you do that you couldn't do before?
It would just do things quicker. And it had, the programmers could, because of the excellent time-sharing operating system, then multiple programmers could use it at the same time. And I mean, sometimes over Christmas, they were a bit too keen, and we could use some of the more privileged commands to persuade them to go home early. Because we called it the system manager's kiss. We could just stop their process and they'd be typing away and it would suddenly not respond to them. So some of them were a bit ambitious, and then they'd log back in again, so we'd kill them, and then we'd log back in again until they took the hint and went home for Christmas Eve.
Okay. So let's talk about, so this is your first taste of DEC, isn't it? This is at Ferranti still. Yeah. What happens next? Where do you go after this?
Well, I went down from Ferranti down to Plessy Defence Systems down on the south coast, which already had quite a few DEC systems set up.
What were they running?
It was a cluster, but I can't remember exactly which ones. There was a few 782 type clusters, VAX clusters they were called then, by the way, not VMS clusters. because they were only vaxes. But yeah, I mean, I was a good fit for that environment. My new job was called a software engineer there, because it was a software engineering company. And again, I think that's where the likes of these industries and digital had a very good rapport, because there was engineering disciplines in use, you know what I mean, and enthusiasm. So yes, I used to have some debates with a fella that started in Cardiff University with a vax cluster, and he reckons it was the first in Wales, whereas I think that the Ferranti one was, because they would not have publicised it, you know, because of the nature of it. So, whereas for the university, I dare say they were very quick to show it off.
So tell us, so you're working at Plessey in using VAX systems. What kind of work is happening there, and how are you using the VAX systems?
Yeah, a lot of it was developing for military systems again. A lot of software development. There was some commercial packages run, but not many of them. And I actually managed. They were brilliant tools for performance management, by the way, because in those days, memory and disks were very expensive, right? Especially compared to these days. And so you had to go and maximize the use. And even though VMS itself came with some very excellent utilities, it would only show it on the screen, you know, nice little plots, little graph plots. Whereas I wrote the program specifically so that it could print it out on a full sheet of line printer in Pascal, by the way. I was one of the many languages I taught myself, and using that data, I persuade the management there to introduce FlexiTime, because it stood out like a sore thumb. All the programmers would start around 8:30, 9 o'clock, and the CPU load would do this, and then you would see it drop off because they'd all have about the same lunchtime. Right? Back from lunch, it would do that again, and it would completely overwhelm the system. Not just the CPU, but the memory as well. It would run out of memory, and that would cause troubles, you know, with paging faults and all that type of stuff. So it's all I did was, look, I said to the directors, if we can flatten these graphs, we can put off buying more kit, and the programmers and everybody is going to be happier. And that's what we did. And so they introduced FlexiTime, which was an unusual thing for companies then. And it did. You could see the graphs, of course, because some of them were starting earlier, some of them were starting later. It's obvious now when you think about it, isn't it? But it was just not a done thing, you know what I mean?
So tell us, obviously DEC's got a large footprint in military, it seems. What was attractive? I can see why you're enjoying it for various reasons, but what's it doing for the organisations you're working for? What is DEC doing for these? What is it giving them that they didn't have, or they couldn't get from other computer manufacturers such as IBM?
I think it was the speed of production, because they had excellent programming tools, and excellent debugging was brilliant. Even the cross compilers, as they call them, whereby a program's compiled on one machine with the intention of running it on a different architecture, and there was a lot of that happening as well. The main defense language at that time was Coral 66, which came from 1966, by the way. It shows how old this stuff was. Then, of course, Digital produced an ADA compiler, which was intending to be the new defense language. But it had brilliant tools, absolutely brilliant tools. It had a good editor from the start. It was easy for any new programmer to learn the operating system because it was English, unlike some computer languages these days. And its command language was second to none. Absolutely brilliant.
So it was speaking, is it really a company that was speaking to engineers, or was it speaking to non-engineering users too, do you think?
I think it was, well, in the companies that I worked for up to that point, it was engineers. It was, and And as a result, I think there was a great affinity. I think that if digital had the normal marketing type salesmen, they wouldn't send them there because they knew that they'd be hammered with quite heavy technical questions and they'd be expected to answer them, you know. There was a great deal of mutual respect.
That was an important acquisition. An important element in that their salespeople were very much had an engineering mindset. I think, didn't they?
Yep.
They use engineers to sell to other engineers.
Yeah, and likewise, there's two levels of engineers. There's the ones driving that company in there, and then there's the engineers that would attend our sites to fix things, and they were much better than like board replacement engineers. You know, they'd also be, especially the bigger companies. Barclays, for instance, had a permanent on-site digital engineer, and he would be the contact, the single point of contact into digital, and likewise from digital to Barclays. You know, it was a mutual thing, and it worked a treat. And I can remember when the engineers were very naughty, some of these though, because when I was working at the Plessy site, and it was something, say, not urgent, right? They'd come down and they'd call in the Barclays site on the way there at lunchtime, because Barclays had one excellent restaurant. So they turn up to us. How do you enjoy your meal in Barclays then? Oh, it was lovely, thank you. Fair play for them. I can't say I blame them either. But it was a brilliant working relationship.
So that seems to be important. It's not just the technology, it's the relationship.
Oh, most certainly.
That DEC cultivated with the customers.
Yeah. I mean, there were, at that time, there were other, like, mini computers, MIDI computers type, mid-range manufacturers out there, and probably vying for the same type of business as well. But there was a buzz about it. You know what I mean? It was a pleasure to work with them.
Why do you think it was a pleasure? What made it such a good relationship with them?
Not just this production. I think it was a question of being listened to. Whereby, say, I mean, you're bound to have technical problems, especially in areas whereby digital are new to it. You know, including the defence side, and you'd have problems, and they would be addressed fairly quickly for a sizable organisation. Yeah, you know, these days it's worse, isn't it? The bigger the organisation, the bigger the delay. You know what I mean? But they were quick to react. There was always, like, your own sales manager. There was always a good relationship there, and he'd always keep an eye on what was going on and what was coming up. Likewise, you'd have non-disclosure sessions whereby you'd have an idea what was coming up in the next operating system version, and it would allow you to make sensible business decisions on that.
Well, this is also a good question. Did you get previews of forthcoming technologies as a result of through this relationship? What kind of things did you see?
Yeah, well, I told you about the Alpha when that was in a big session in Newbury Racecourse.
Describe Alpha chip for us, please.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah, that was basically, it was the good parts of the VMS processor on a microprocessor on a small chip. And by that time, of course, I was quite experienced in VMS performance management, and I knew what it was capable of. I went to see these graphics workstations being demonstrated, and I saw that it was manipulating 3D objects in real time. And so on the monitor alongside it, I interrogated it to see how much of the machine's resources it was taking, having to do it. This was well before the days of clever graphics cards, graphic processing units, you know what I mean? So it was all done using the Alpha chip. And it was like minimal. I think it was about 15% of the available CPU time. And I collared the salesman there, and I said, "This is absolutely astounding. You've got a world beater here." I said, I won't tell you the exact language I use, but if you mess this up, you've only got yourselves to blame, because I thought it was brilliant. Of course, you know, the Alpha did have a good future from that point onwards, but I suspect not as good as it could have been.
So you got previews of things that were coming.
Yeah.
And did you?
And software, not just the hardware.
What software did you see? Did you see?
Well, it was again, it was like programming tools, a lot of it, and system management tools as well, because I mean they were very responsive for that, for anything that we wanted, as long as there was enough of us. And this is where the Computer Users Society comes in, because there's a bit of strength in numbers there, isn't it? Whereby if quite a few of us. And like one of my fellow committee members, he worked for BP in London. And by the way, I can remember seeing a Cray supercomputer there, which was being fed the data from a VMS system, and they were they used some very expensive VMS systems. Well, if they have a Cray to play with, they go into, aren't they? You know what I mean? Likewise, there was another one in an oil refinery where the VMS system was looking after fail-safe devices, including safety critical valves and all that. Another one in Port Talbot Steelworks, where the VMS systems were driving the process control computers, including doing the thickness of the steel and all that. So it wasn't just defence; it was in quite a few areas. And if you get this disparate people coming together and having nice discussions and thinking, well, where can we take this? And we'd send that off to digital, and we find they'd react pretty well. They'd have a representative. This was a large system special interest group, so we carried a bit of clout with it. You know what I mean?
That's interesting. So that was a good question I was leading on to. Was you hinted at it there, was DECUS, the DEC user group. Explain that. You were a member of DECUS, weren't you? How did it function? Did you go to meetings? What was it?
Yeah, actually I got my 1982 membership card with me. I'll show you later. And well, I thought it was cracking. I thought it was like-minded people. Like if you go into any scenario where you meet like-minded people, you're bound to get something out of it. All of you are, you know. And it was especially the conferences. They were like over a few days in a university. The meetings would go on to late at night, maybe in the bar, but so be it. And they were very, very good times indeed, from both the customer's point of view and digital point of view.
What kind of function did it fulfill?
It was like, well, I tell you what, if you had any technical question that was on your mind and you're not getting anywhere with, you bring it to that, it'll be answered. And digital, they had some of the experts from the States over there, because they knew what to expect, you know what I mean? And that would help you as a person, because you could get on with your job better, and the company you work for. They were absolutely brilliant. And I volunteered for the committee because I thought it was time to give something back. I'll give you a little story of how DECUS was useful to us. Albeit there was probably a policy at the time whereby you shouldn't really use software without a formal agreement, you know what I mean? But there was this, well, we call it facilities management. I found myself working for a facilities management company, Hoskins and a few others, and we had to go and bid to put together a technical help desk down company down south, and we had to do this. We won it. Had to put it together in 6 weeks without any staff, any kit or anything, and we did it. And of course, it was like it was a bit slow to start off with, but one piece of software, I think it was called Deliver, was used with the excellent VMS mail systems. This is before the use of, you know, email as we know it these days. VMS had its own little email system. And by the way, instant messaging, which they called the phone utility. And this software would interrogate the mail messages, and therefore you could do processing with them. So I quickly sussed out that this would be useful on the help desk. So somebody logs a call, like something's gone wrong technically, and these are generally in terminal rooms because of the secure nature of the stuff, right? So there was maybe some software problem they had to deal with, maybe a hardware problem, and they'd want to see a status of it instead of phoning up and then taking another phone call and asking. It's all they had to do was put the log number with status in the mail subject, and then VMS with a bit of programming, especially with me in it. I was quite proud of that, even if I say so myself. It would grab hold of the status from the whatever trouble ticket management system we had, and then send it back to them, which of course cut down the number of phone calls we had to deal with drastically. That was a brilliant piece of software, and that's just one example.
So did you, because the DEC's community is very good at publishing software and sharing software.
Yep.
Is this a piece of software you got through that?
Yep,
network?
it was, yeah. And likewise, we donated some stuff as well, because, you know, it's a bit of give and take there.
What kind of things did you donate?
There was a few utilities, including for backups and the like, and interrogating them. Incidentally, coming up through the lanes on toward Oxford today, I came past the Williams Racing Teams Conference Centre. I did a talk there for DEC many years ago, and it just popped out into my vision on the left-hand side. I can remember that. What a coincidence that was.
So it's a use. So DEC's had a useful function in sharing ideas and software. I mean, do you think it would have been possible to achieve business outcomes without this interchange of software and ideas?
I think you could have, but it would have taken long and been much more expensive. It's like a lot of things in life, you know. It's best to, if you can, collaborate on these things, and a lot of it was very altruistic. People won't even get any recognition for, like, financial recognition for this. It would just give them a nice little warm buzz that they're helping somebody, which was the same with me, to be honest.
And was there any questions of things like copyright or intellectual property or all that?
No, that was all sorted out as part of the DEC software library. So, like, you know, there was no warranty though, as you'd see in open source software these days. All sorts of legal jargon over it, but basically it's at your own risk you use it, you know what I mean? But of course, you know, we were all skilled enough that the source code was there. We could see it wasn't going to do anything nasty.
And any idea how big the volume of material was on that library? Did you ever get a sense of how big it was?
It was massive, absolutely huge. Because of course it wasn't just the UK, it was worldwide, and especially America. Like I think it was like a new library a year, somewhere around that. So I think you probably still access them online.
I mean, it's a good question. Do you think that, or rather, how important was this compared to what were other tech companies not getting right that DEC was getting right in its relationship with customers?
I'll go back a bit. When my wife's got a similar story, but of course she can't be here today. She started at Barclays. She'd already worked on VMS systems, right? And Barclays sent her on an IBM course, IBM mainframe course. It wasn't ZOS, it was the previous flavour of it. And when they were teaching her how to set up a file and things, it was extremely basic, including how many physical cylinders you had to allocate to the file. And so she piped up to the to the tutor saying, "What?" And because she'd already been on one of these IBM courses about 8 years previously, teaching the same sort of thing. Whereas in VMS, you sort of create the file and the operating system looks after it, as you'd expect on a modern Windows system or Unix system, yeah? But no, you had to tell the IBM system exactly where to create the file, how many physical cylinders to allocate it, and all that type of stuff. I went on a Solaris or Sunos course, right? I can't remember. I changed the name in any case, from Sun Microsystems, and there was myself and another VMS system manager on the course, and we had similar discussions. We couldn't believe to our eyes how backward the operating system was. It wasn't as bad as like the fundamentals of a mainframe, but the inherent unfriendliness of it then compared to VMS. And in years since, if I speak to somebody that's been involved in VMS, they always say it was the best operating system in the world. Inherently secure and very performant.
And user-friendly because you didn't have to go through a deep level of...
Oh, crikey, yeah. Just sensible commands, syntax. Absolutely brilliant.
Tell us also, it seems like you kind of sort of became, I'm not quite clear, you told us, or told me about an anecdote, how you, before you got into Barclays, they came in to see a cluster you'd been running.
Oh, yeah.
And then they went and outsized you. But you seem like at this point you're sort of becoming an unpaid ambassador for the company as well, it seems.
Yeah. I mean, my wife at that time, she was working for Barclays on the networking side, and she knew about the VMS systems because she'd had involvement with them years before, and she said that they were looking at setting up a VMS system, and I didn't know what for, and she said any chance that some of the senior managers could visit. And I said, yeah, certainly. Now, my wife likes things very, very tidy, right? Now, our computer room was an engineering computer room. There was like, it worked beautifully, but there were cables everywhere and things being moved around and that type of stuff, right? So I did organise a meeting in Plessy's boardroom for these Barclays senior managers and give them a high level, a very high level overview of what the main features of the entire systems were, hardware and software, and it seemed to go down quite well. And so I did bump into them in a train some months later. They didn't say much. I thought, oh well, nothing's going to happen. And then they reciprocated and invited me and the boss down to their purpose-built data center in Poole, and there was a sizable VMS cluster running in a distant corner, which made us extremely envious. I can remember my boss going through the doors going, bloody wow, because that was doing it properly, you know what I mean? It's like,
how big, how can you put that in terms of scale people could actually understand?
You could, I don't know about modern stuff, but the Intercity 125 trains, you'd fit one in there, end to end. It was that long. A single span building, purpose built as a data center, and and we ended up using it as half of a high availability cluster. You
said, yeah, it had it split over to another site that was 4 miles away with 4 nodes. I think
that's it. Yeah, that's it. And of course, since then, you've been able to have clusters that are hundreds of miles apart.
Mm. How big was that for the time? What, 80s, late 80s was that?
Late 80s, yeah, and early 90s.
How advanced was it to have that kind of scale and size for the time?
Well, because it was doing a very important job, it was, well, the one that I was contracted on, when Barclays went to take VMS up, they did it big time because they used all-in-one, the office automation system, and it was a massive cluster to support that. Well, of course, Barclays have got a lot of office staff, you know what I mean? So they made excellent use of it. They had other sites around the world, and I think it was the biggest private network at the time as well for VMS. So it was a massive setup, absolutely huge setup, with tape silos and that type of stuff, you know.
So that's because when we'll come on to something else in a second, but you said here when you were asked in a survey, you said about one of the DEC environments that you worked on that you thought was particularly cool or you were impressed by. This was the high availability cluster for Barclays, I think.
Oh, correct. Yeah.
What was it doing?
I mean, we had high availability clusters, but not as well. Basically, you can count how much it would cost if the system went down. That's how you size these things up. And so the less downtime that you can cope with, the more expensive it's going to be. Full stop, isn't it? So you need redundancy built in. You need it so that if one processor goes, another processor automatically takes over. If one lot of disk goes, another lot take over. So you got the what's now called RAID 1, I think. It's volume shadowing is the VMS thing, and as you're probably aware now that clustering was the gold standard for clustering and systems at that time, and probably is pretty up there now, to be honest.
And I think you said it was working with for a European a European network trading system. What could you just explain what the cluster was talking to?
When I went to work on as a contractor there, I was tasked with looking after a sizable cluster, which was the interfacing to the Barclays bank network, SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide, whatever it's called, financial transaction. And of course, it's best if it doesn't go down. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of payments going through it. All the SWIFT payments were going through that system. And as I said to you, and I'm not one to potch about with these systems, these critical systems in any case. So I only did what was necessary, that if there was a hardware problem, dealing with it, and if some software needed tweaking, I would tweak it, but there was not going to be major changes. It was going to be shut down, and that's when I started looking at the system startup scripts. I needed to change the configuration in preparation for its final close down. Did I look at the comments at the top of the script and find out that the system had been released to live by my dear wife, and I couldn't believe my eyes. Some 10 years just before I was about to shut it down again.
So the system that she set up to talk to SWIFT, you ended up closing down.
That's it, yeah. That's a hell of a coincidence.
Why were you closing it down?
Well, it's because it was being transferred. It was being transferred over to another HP Tandem, actually. But yeah. But of course, then they decided to stick with VMS for Euro processing. So all the Euro payments were going through VMS for a good few years, and that was a fairly sizable, high availability cluster.
So tell us about your wife's name. What's your wife's name? She's the person who set up this Swift cluster, wasn't she?
Yeah. So, yeah, Sonia did it. Sonia Marsh Edwards. So her name, I couldn't believe it, because I had no reason, even though I'd worked on it now for over a year, I had no reason to look in that startup file. You know what I mean? And I printed it off and I showed the other people I was working with. You couldn't believe it. I said, in all these years, that shows how much I've advanced. I said, in 10 years, I'm only capable of switching something off that my wife has created. Yeah, it went down well, I did.
So what do you think? So by now you're working as an independent consultant, but you're working with Barclays.
Yep.
Any kind of big challenges that you managed to overcome?
I did actually work for a short contract with NatWest Insurance as well, and that was a different bit of commercial side I've never seen before, and I never realised what load insurance adverts can put on a system, because once NatWest Insurance put a television advert out, then there'd be umpteen phone calls and lots of hits on the system. I'd never seen that before, whereby the system load was directly proportional to when a television advert would go out. You know what I mean? But with Barclays, I mean, they had a very good relationship with digital, and as I said, it was important enough to digital that they would actually put their own engineer there. And we had regular service meetings and the like as well.
Did you? I hear this also, that DEC would give sort of free support to customers as well. I wouldn't charge for things, especially when things were going well for the company. Did you ever experience or see any of that?
No, I didn't see any of that. Of course, it happened informally because of the relationship. You know, we could always find out things and all that type of thing, and it was and the fact that the engineer was on site, if there was nothing for him to fix, then we could use his skills, couldn't we? You know what I mean? So there was that type of free support, but nothing major.
And over the lifetime of DEC, did you see the company's fortunes change? Obviously, it was great up until the mid-80s, and things changed. How did you see that playing out as a customer?
Well, there was a few little, as you have in large companies, there's a few little internal battles taking place, because we all like to fight our corner, you know what I mean? And not necessarily from a future career perspective, because you truly think that would be the best technology to use. And well, I've seen some other senior managers may differ, of course, but yeah, there was I think at that time there was a lack of direction. For instance, the staff moved around, and some of the ones that we were used to speaking with, they went, like, didn't go to another part of digital. They were just made redundant or whatever. And there was at one point where we had so many sales managers in a year. So that's always a bad sign, you know what I mean? That's not good.
How did the sales managers change? Because you described how they were very much engineering centric to start with. Was the nature of the sales manager changing as well? I
think it was, well, at least it was still, I still think they had a lot of enthusiasm about them, and the need to do a good job. But you know, they didn't have the history, did they? They didn't have the history of that company they were dealing with. It's like, and this modern term is know your customer. Well, if you're having 18 sales managers in a year, you're not going to know your customer too well, are you? And that would be noticed in the senior management of the company I was working for, or any company indeed.
How did that change things? Did senior management start getting uncomfortable with the
I mean, it was just, there was always a battle for various platforms, including mainframe. IBM's i-Series, the AS400s, and especially Unix, various Unix flavors, yeah? And so there's going to be these battles, and at times like that, there's going to be more weight on the other platforms. It's bound to happen.
So you said that instability started cracking a door for IBM and for Unix as well.
Yeah. And I may have mentioned that we were pioneering IBM's WebSphere MQ series on VMS, and it was doing a bloody good job, to be honest. And then there was some question as to whether IBM would support it. And so when that happens, then even I start to think, they're now not serious about this. IBM aren't serious about supporting that platform. And obviously it was HP at the time, I expect. Yeah, beyond Compaq, wasn't it? Yeah, it would have been HP at the time. They're obviously not that serious of trying to persuade IBM that it's worth supporting. So you could see it going down the pan. And
you as a company starting to make platform decisions based on that?
Well, the company was, yeah. I wasn't personally. I would have stayed with it, to be honest. And going back, by the way, to that help desk thing, when I said about speed of reaction, we had to go and get a lot of monitors in, you know, for the help desk staff to take the calls, to log them and all that. And we dealt with a small digital specialist company called Microsystem Support of Bristol. And I spoke to the managing director of it after we had a discussion, and they're still supporting VMS systems. And I thought, I was really pleased about that, you know, because that was proper customer service. To get those VT100s, you know, the old like green screen monitors, they were grey screen when they really, get it like about 20 of them delivered in next to no time. Fair play for them. And so it wasn't just digital, it was the other small companies working with digital. They had that quest to please the customers as well. You know, it's lovely to see it.
And you think, so VMS systems are still being used today?
Oh, most certainly.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, it has been, it's had a lease of life now with VSI. So it's, you know, it's not owned by HP anymore. So, I hope it lasts for years. I really do.
Do you, looking back, you've obviously come a long way. Your career has been built from an early stage on digital. How do you think it's kind of I ask this question to people who work for the company. It's slightly different for a customer, I accept that. But I'm curious to find out how you think working with digital influenced you, what its legacy is on you. And then second question for you to think more broadly, what do you the company's obviously no longer here, but what did it leave a legacy either in terms of technology or philosophy or culture? Is there a legacy? So first of all, what has been its legacy for you?
Well, I'm here speaking to you as one of them. Yeah, but I've been really pleased with how things have turned out, especially for the son of a miner from the mining valleys, who was like probably more arrogant than he should have been in my younger days. And whereas my accent automatically makes people think I'm rather thick. You know what I mean? I have not done too bad of it, and I got to thank digital a lot for that. I just, we were a good match for each other. We really were. And I've met some very lovely people along the way as well, and extremely clever people along the way. And there's yet another little story. I'm a member of a Carmarthen Photographic Society, and a couple of years ago I attended a competition. There was a judge there. I did a little bit looking at his background as to like what type of images he prefers, and I found out that he worked for digital. And so there was a few people waiting to speak to him in the coffee time, and I said to my son was with me, I said, you watch this now. I said, you'll have a shock. And I said, hello, pleased to meet you. I said, what's the best operating system? VMS, he said. And everybody in the photographic club wondered what the hell we were talking about. But that's a legacy, isn't it? Whereas even a judge in a camera club competition, it's stuck in his head as well. So yeah, I think even the training, which was based in Reading a lot, wasn't it? Right? The training was brilliant. It was very professionally run. There was like enough kit and things worked. The courses were well designed, and even every aspect of it. I mean, apart from the marketing and the later days, it was a brilliant company to work with.
Did you ever go to DEC in Reading for the training?
Yes.
Did you see the offices down there?
Yeah, Shire Hall, was it?
I think it was. Well, describe the office. What did it feel like?
It looked modern to me, especially from an MOD site. You know what I mean? It was like and you had proper teaching environment. It was calm. It was proper teaching kit.
Was it a room? Was it desks?
Yeah,
How was
yeah.
it? Describe it to us.
Yeah. It was a little bit old classroomish, but of course everybody had. They didn't have laptops then. They had their own monitors onto a system, and a proper system, with whatever they were teaching you at the time, including VMS system management. Excellent VMS systems management courses.
And the building is very modern compared to what you're used to. Did you meet many DEC staff? What did you feel like the environment was like down there?
Yeah, the DEC staff, they portrayed that company extremely well. The ones that I met, it was just a professional attitude. They knew what job was needed. It wasn't done very formally. It was done with humour and a good rapport, put it that way.
There's a kind of this concept of doing right by the customer, which came from Olsen himself, which means not trying to oversell or upsell. And I hinted at this by giving some things away for free, and they were obviously receptive to your ideas. Did you ever get a sense? Did you ever come across this phrase? And if not, did you get a sense of they were trying to do right by the customer, by you?
Always, in those early days, absolutely always. There was always a feeling that they wanted to please, and you won't see that very often these days. But all the engineers I dealt with, they were and again, it was their caliber was down to not only their technical training, but the type of people they are. That they can go into a big company and hold their own, especially if something goes wrong in the financial system and they got some director shouting at them. You know what I mean? They have to be diplomats. They have to be ambassadors, as well as being very technically capable. Fair play for them.
It's a slightly loaded question, but what could tech companies learn today from this culture? Is there something, or is it have things moved on for the better since then? Is there anything missing, do you think?
Well, I'm getting on a bit now, and I'm getting cynical in my old age, you know. But I think it's changed. I think there's another attitude whereby, like this attitude of just reboot it, you know, for practically everything. And well, I was thinking back to this the Fujitsu Horizon system. I thought, like, how on earth is that? Now, I've been aware of that for decades, to be honest, as many people in my position would have been, I knew, respect. And why it's taken a television dramatization to go and do things about it, I don't know. But there's always been an approach whereby, well, things aren't tested as well as they should be in the past. And the approach that nobody seems to want to hang on to be accountable for fixing your problem. They'd rather, like, maybe it's because of the amount of pressure that people are under, but it's certainly a lot that could be learned from that company. I think if they continued with that approach and with various other things and decent marketing, then I still think they'd be thriving today.
That was the question. Where do you think DEC got it wrong?
That's a hard one. One of them was certainly not maintaining those relationships at the higher echelons within the big UK companies. I don't know what it was like in the States, but I know that it's not as big there as it used to be. But that was one of them. And, you know, an account manager, they would normally visit you regularly and have a chat, and including the senior managers, as to like how they could help and that type of stuff. And again, compared to some things that happen these days, when they said they were going to do it, they would do it. And most senior managers would react positively to that. You don't see much of that anymore.
I'm going to throw this question at you because it's bothering me, and I get sensitive. Obviously, your wife, you mentioned. Did you meet through is there any connection through DEC? Did that kind of bring you together in any way?
We met through working in the same company on digital stuff, yeah. So that's another thing I got to be grateful for, eh?
How did you meet? Working on systems together?
Yeah. She was a programmer's assistant, they were called. And as I said, I was an operator when I started there. So there was and I've met quite a few people. This was in Ferranti, by the way. Quite a few people of that time, and they've all got fond memories of working on those systems as well. So I mean, this excellent initiative you're doing here, I think you could spend weeks doing it, to be honest, with people like myself.
And this is the final question, I think. Tell me about, what do you think is DEC's legacy for the world? You mentioned what it was for you, how it has influenced your life, and we can see that. As we said, the company no longer exists, but is there anything it's left in the world in some way, shape or form, tangible or general?
Well, I like to think, as regards how computing has evolved, I like to think they will still be remembered well for the ability to produce computer resources that are highly available and highly secure. Like, we never had any hassle with viruses or anything, you know what I mean? There we go. This is Barclays, of course, is very very serious about this, and rightly so, yeah. So, of course, I was asked to attend a meeting with technical consultants from the other platforms, saying what's our approach to sticking antivirus software on our systems. I said, well, we haven't got any. You have to have it. Well, I can go and write some if you want to, but like, there's never been a virus. You know, and besides which, there's so few of them, it's not likely to be targeted either, is it? You know what I mean? And that was there was a strange little discussion, but I hope that everybody that's working on these systems that will have some branch of VMS clusters and the hierarchical system of security that was inherent in VMS so that you can depend on a computing platform. That's about it. If some of that has gone onto other platforms and operating systems, then I'll be pleased.